everyone for coming out tonight. It's great to see such a great turnout. My name is Krista Monroe. I am the chemistry professor here at Landmark, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Cary Supalo. I met Cary in 2016 in Princeton, New Jersey as part of the local American Chemical Society section. The outreach interests that we had in common, we kind of kept in contact. And when he said, I want to come to Vermont, I was like, well, let's see what we can do. So his talk is co-sponsored by the AIE STEM Plus grant, which is an NSF funded grant, and the Academic Speaker Series. I want to give a shout out to Fernando, Sophia, and Wayne, who helped Cary to do this that you guys will see in a few minutes. And so Cary's day job is working at ETS, Education Testing Services. In his spare time, he runs a company he founded, Independent Science, which is a small assistive technology accessibility consulting firm. He's also active with the print disabled community at the local and global levels. Just to give you a sense of how busy and active Cary is, in the last month he was at the UN, he then went to Vietnam, then was in Indianapolis, and now he's here today in Vermont, and then tomorrow he's off to LA. So Cary is super busy. I'm not even exaggerating. Like,
you missed my pit stop in Japan too.
Wow. So I'm not going to take up any more time. I'm just going to introduce Cary, and he's going to talk about all the awesome things that he does. So thank you for everyone for coming out, and thank you, Cary, for coming out.
Thank you very much. All right. So we filmed a little video introductory clip, so we're going to go ahead and, are you ready to play the clip? Okay, good afternoon. Today, we're going to be conducting a common chemistry demonstration activity. It's referred to as elephant toothpaste. So what this reaction consists of is a standard decomposition of hydrogen peroxide with a universal indicator to add some nice colorful flavor to it. We're going to use a commercially available surfactant known as dish soap to add to the reaction, which is going to create a bubble phenomenon that this reaction will be emitting a gas. Now, I being totally blind, I had to take some precautionary measures that demonstrate some methodologies of what I use when working in the laboratory workspace as a blind individual. So I'm going to point out to the audience, first, we have this tray here in front of me. This serves as a tactile indicator as to where spillable materials may be placed in the workspace. And then if you notice, this bottle here has a funnel in the top to assist me with pouring liquids and solids into what I'm going to call the reaction vesicle during the demonstration. And as you see, at the base, I'm using additional beakers around this graduated cylinder and this bottle to give additional support to try to minimize toppling. You know, when you're conducting an experiment, you don't want your reaction vesicle to inadvertently spill over. So, with those conventions, and I've got my colleagues to my right who are going to be working with a Bunsen burner to determine whether or not we actually formed oxygen gas as we were hoping for. So with that, I will begin. So I have a graduate cylinder with hydrogen peroxide. This chemistry demonstration illustrates a decomposition of hydrogen peroxide to water and the emission of oxygen gas. So the Bunsen burner test will determine whether or not we actually made oxygen gas. So we'll see at the end. I'm going to add hydrogen peroxide to the funnel, like so. Very nice. And that down there. And then we add the catalyst with the yeast. All right. And as you see, we proved we formed oxygen from the decomposition of hydrogen peroxide. Thanks, guys. Wonderful work. So that's just a simple illustration of how a blind person can work in the chemistry laboratory. So all right, so I want to talk a little bit today about my career path and how I became a blind scientist and things that helped me get to where I am, in the hopes that some of the lessons that I learned will be beneficial to you guys in some way or another, to help you, to the students in the room, to the older adults. Well, you know, I'm in your group now too, so. But to help the students on their path to figure out what they want to do in life, and they might be feeling some feeling of uncertainty because of a certain class, or maybe a certain professor is really challenging them harder, or intellectually more so than they've ever been challenged before, and they're not sure, whatever the challenge may be, okay? But to the students in the room, you know what I'm talking about, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Okay, only one person knows. Okay, the rest of you are lucky. But, okay, so the next slide, please. So here we have images of blind people doing different types of tasks. Okay, you see here, there's a blind person driving a car. That actually happened back 12 years ago now. It was part of a project called the Blind Driver Challenge, sponsored by the National Federation of the Blind. And I met with Will earlier today, and I said the National Federation of the Blind tends to be more progressive with their expectations of what blind people are capable of doing. And Will, I didn't tell you about driving a car.
I mean, I can drive a boat. I haven't killed anyone yet, but
yes,
I wouldn't.
But my friend Mark, there, he's totally blind, and we built a non-visual access interface that uses haptics feedback through gloves and through like you know those back massages you have in your car when you're driving along? Well, we converted that into a haptics feedback for cues for a blind driver with sensors on the front of the vehicle. And we conducted this public demonstration at the Daytona 500 Speedway down in Florida before, not the Daytona 500, but another car race, I forget which one it was. And he got the car up to 35 miles an hour and was weaving around other boxes and vehicles on the road. It was a pretty cool demonstration. So that, and then there is my other friend, Dan Brown, who is another speed enthusiast. He recently drove a Corvette over 200 miles an hour as a totally blind driver. I forget where that occurred, but in this case, he's driving a motorcycle. He loves feeling the wind around him, driving vehicles really, really fast. Again, I don't advocate for this. I'm just showing it to you as an example. And then, of course, several years ago, there was a blind USC Trojan football player who actually got into a game. On one play, he's the placeholder for an extra point. And it's like, all right, NCAA Division I college football player, blind driver, blind motorcyclist, blind pole vaulter, competing again at the NCAA Division I level. You know, all these people are blind or visually impaired. How do they do it? Right? Makes you wonder, doesn't it? But 15 and 20 years ago, these outcomes were just a dream. People would have laughed at this slide. They would have accused you of making stuff up, right? But all this stuff, these are real individual cases of how inclusion of people with disabilities in areas previously not thought possible is becoming more the reality. So how did they do it? Well, we'll get into that. All right, the next slide, please, is, so I was totally sighted when I was little. Played baseball, rode a bicycle. I was a big fan of riding big wheels. Anyone ride a big wheel when you were a kid? Yeah, exactly. And and then I went, when I was shortly after my 7th birthday, I went to bed, woke up the next morning and couldn't read print anymore. And it was very difficult for me to see it. I mean, I could see little smudges of color and some shapes, but I could not see like I did the day before. And I told my parents, hey, I can't see. I can't go to school today. I'm not feeling well. Well, I wasn't a student that really liked school. And they thought I was just making it up so I'd get to stay home. They sent my butt to school. Okay, and I walked to school that day with my brothers and sisters, just looking down at the ground 1 foot at a time, make sure I don't trip over any curbs or whatever. This is the month of May of my first grade year, and it just happened to be standardized testing time. Anyone ever take standardized tests in school? Yeah. Wasn't that a favorable time? Because those grades didn't really count towards your GPA, and you could, they're actually very important. And so I was handed my test booklet, and I looked at the pages, and I couldn't read anything. And so I just started scribbling my number 2 pencil, just marks on the page, hoping I was going to fill in some circles. Because in my mind, I didn't want to fail this test because I couldn't read. And the teachers who were proctoring the exam saw that I was struggling. They said, "Cary, is something wrong?" I said, "I can't read the print." And they gave me an index card to sort of line up where the little circles were to fill in to see if I could see them better, and I couldn't. So they sent me down to the nurse's office. I sat in front of the eye chart. I could read the big letter E at the top and nothing else. And they called my mom at home. She was a stay-at-home mom at the time. And she picked me up and took me straight to the doctor's office. Somehow back in the early 80s, she got me to see an eye specialist on the same day. I have no idea how she did that, but it actually happened. And the eye doctor looked in my one good eye. My second eye was removed when I was 18 months, so I have a prosthetic in my left eye. And he saw all this blood and a detached retina damage and that. He said, "Did you get hit in the head?" I said, "No. I just went to bed and woke up." Very anticlimactic, right? Fortunately for me. But after several years of genetic testing and trying to figure out what caused the visual impairment, they determined that it was caused by a rare eye condition called familial exudative vitreal retinopathy, or FEVR, which is typically experienced by children when you're around the ages of 6 and 7. And I have it in an extreme case of total blindness today, but a lot of FEVR patients or people have varying levels of usable vision. And it might lead to some partial retinal detachments to holes in the retina, which can be fixed via laser treatments and such. But for me, there's nothing for me. But that's okay. I've long since accepted the fact that I'm a blind person and moved on. And so let's see. Next slide. So what did I do between age 7? So I was out of school for a number of months, and for me, not liking school, that was a great thing. I was at home watching TV, hanging out with my mom. Then summer vacation came. My brothers and sisters were home and had a great time over the summertime. Then school started in the fall. I still didn't go back to school. And it was around middle of September of that next school year when my oldest brother, Ronnie, sat me down, and he's my oldest brother. He's 10 years older than me. And he read me this story about a kid that didn't like school. And it had visual imagery in the book of the kid not going to school. He went to the playground, he went to the mall, he went to the arcade, he went to the movies, while all of his friends and brothers and sisters kept going to school. And it had imagery of all of his friends and siblings growing up and becoming young professionals and going off and getting jobs, while he still looked like a little kid. And he was very unhappy with the situation because he was all alone and had nobody to play with. And my brother said to me, "Cary, this is you if you don't go back to school." I suddenly became very terrified of my situation. And I remember going to my mom moments after that interaction and said, "Mommy, when can I go back to school?" And she said, "I don't know." More terror in my life at that moment. Like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Well, several days passed, and it was time for our elementary school open house for the next school year. And my brothers and sisters and I went to the school and went to their classes, and they showed some of their first several weeks of projects they were working on, and looked at their desks and saw their stuff. And of course, I went to my second grade class, and my desk was completely empty because I hadn't gone to school yet. And while my folks were at the open house that night, they met one of the special education teachers at the school. And he mentioned to my parents about a local instructional unit that provides services to, at that time, handicapped students was the term in vogue at that time. And so the next day my parents called that office, and in a day or two after that, I got taken down to their office and got what's called a vision evaluation. And then they started letting me see magnifiers of various sorts, with lights, without lights, CCTVs. And by the following Monday, guess what? I was back in school with low vision magnification tools and that one. It was a very liberating moment for me because it takes education for granted if it's always there. But when it's taken away from you for any extended period of time, and then you get to go back, okay. I never took education for granted again after that. And I learned years later from a bus driver in high school that said, Cary, the education is worth investing in because people can take everything away from you, your house, your home, the clothes off your back, but they can't take away your education. And that resonated with me to this day. It's like, wow, that's kind of a cool point. Anyone ever look at education that way before? Once you have it, it's always yours to do with what you want with it, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Isn't it worth investing in? Time, energy, money. Exactly. So I took an interest in math when doing math in my head in my late elementary school years when my classmates all got regular 4-function calculators. But at that time, talking calculators were not a thing. So I had to teach myself to do long division and 3-digit multiplication in my head, and I got pretty decent at it. I'm still decent at it now, but I'm not as good as I was then at it. And then when I got to middle school, I had a problem in middle school. I was getting A's in practically every class. Anyone ever have this problem? and so after my 7th grade year, my teacher, the visually impaired, and my IEP team, they suggested, well, why don't we push Cary into 8th grade algebra class? Just to give him more of a challenge. And I remember them sitting me down in this IEP meeting, and I'd never been in my IEP meeting, but this is the first time as an 8th grader. I had no idea there was this room full of people all talking about me and my education and what's good for me. I had no idea. And they said, Cary, do you want to take algebra? And I said, sure. And I didn't even know what algebra was or how to spell it. But I said, yeah, let's do it. And going into algebra class in 8th grade, that's when I encountered inaccessible math content, if you will. So my teacher would frequently say, up at the board, take this times this equals that. See? I got a lot of that. That was not very helpful. And then he was told to just read what you write on the board so Cary can follow along better. Okay, so then he said, okay, x squared plus y squared over z squared plus 1 equals 14. Now, do you guys know what I'm talking about when I say that? Since you don't have a visual, you don't know either, right? But if I say to you, take the fraction, the numerator, the quantity x squared plus y squared over the denominator z squared, that fraction plus 1 equals 14. It's clear now, isn't it? Yeah. It's, as we say, non-ambiguous communication. And most math teachers don't use these non-ambiguous verbal communication tools, but I would hope that teachers would take an interest and try this out in their teaching, because by reinforcing the visual with the non-ambiguous verbal spoken communication, it just might enhance your students' learning just a little bit. To those teachers in the room, hint, hint. So anyway, so that was challenging for me in 8th grade algebra, but I did get through it. The algebra teacher gave me a saving grace. He said, if your quiz score and your test score are lower than your final exam score, he'd take the final exam score and replace the quiz and test score with your final exam score if it was higher. That saved my butt in algebra. Because it took me a while to figure it out, but once I did by the final, I nailed it. And so I ended up getting an A in algebra and off to high school I went. And that's when I started getting into science lab classes. And I told some of the life science faculty earlier today about one of my experiences with a frog dissection in biolab. Basically, my biology teacher made it a very hands-on learning experience for me by getting my hands all dirty in the frog and feeling the heart and the lungs and the liver and such. And he ended up taking a big glob of frog fat and letting me feel it and telling me that it was frog fat and asking me, what is that used for? I said, I have no idea. And he proceeded to rub it into my hand like that. He says, Cary, this is hand lotion. Right. Well, my hand smelled like formaldehyde for the next at least 2 weeks after that. And that's what we used to preserve our specimens back in the 90s was formaldehyde. We know how healthy that is, right? Not. Exactly. So, but I loved the fact that I was engaged and involved in a dissection for the first time in my life. And it really was a multi-sensory learning experience because it was tactile, it was olfactory, it was visual too, even though I couldn't see it. Okay, but it was multi-sensory nonetheless, so that was really cool. And then there was my chemistry high school teacher who was emphatic that I not be engaged in any physical manipulations in lab. He says, you will not touch anything in lab because if anything happens to you, I'm responsible for it. So I was not allowed to mix any beakers together or pour any liquids or do any weighing or anything. This is a very passive way of learning. I hated chemistry in high school, actually. So if you hate chemistry now, it can change. It can. So anyway, I got through chemistry, physics, graduated from high school. I wanted to tell one other story about high school. So going into senior year, I wanted to take calculus class. Anyone here take calculus before? Yeah. Do you like calculus?
No.
Yeah. It is a challenging subject for sure. And I was finishing up my pre-calculus course end of junior year, and I wanted to calculus my senior year. Well, we had a special IEP meeting. You remember that room of all those people talking about what was good for me in learning? Well, this time it was a different tone. It was, Cary, if you want to take calculus senior year, we cannot support you because no blind person has ever taken calculus before. That's what they told me. This is before the internet. So I didn't have my Google friend to help me find other blind mathematicians throughout human history.
And what was this?
This was 1992 timeframe. So I didn't know any better. Now, I was a very introverted high school kid. Seeing me up here now, you wouldn't believe that, but I was. And I remember standing up in that meeting and walking out of there and slamming the door behind me because I was frankly ticked off. And I went back to my physics class they took me out of to have this conversation with. And I sat down at my desk and I had one of the most embarrassing moments of my high school life. I started crying right there in class. And my physics teacher came over and said, Cary, what's wrong? I said, I just realized I'm always going to be limited in what I am able to achieve. Because that's what they told me. You can't do calculus, Cary, you're blind. Why would you even think to do something like that? So I ended up taking, not calculus senior year, I took business math, which is a useful course for those here who have taken it, where you learn how to balance a checkbook and calculate sales tax and keep a budget and all those wonderful things that you can all do with a $2 iOS app on your phone. But valuable skills nonetheless, but it wasn't calculus, right? And I graduated high school, and between high school and college, I had the fortune of stumbling onto this National Federation of the Blind organization I mentioned earlier, and going to one of their national conventions for the first time. And showing up at the convention, seeing literally thousands of blind people walking this way and that way, going out to eat, going to meetings, hanging out, socializing. And I was afraid to cross the street in front of my parents' house, let alone to go out and be independent like that. And I said, how does this all work? And I didn't know, but I knew that this organization was going to teach me a lot. And I'll never forget, one of the first sessions I went to had a panel of 3 blind professionals. And the first speaker was a blind high school calculus teacher. Okay, what's up here? All right, the next person was a blind electrical engineer that worked for NASA at the time. Like, wait a minute, I want to be an engineer, and I didn't know I could do that. And then the third speaker was another high school woodshop teacher A blind woodshop teacher teaching woodshop to sighted kids. Okay, so in 45 minutes, my whole life changed as to what I thought was possible. Can you see how that would be the case? Here are living examples of people doing what I thought I couldn't do. And I said, I gotta meet those people and find out how they do what they do. And then I learned, running around the convention, that I met blind people that were lawyers, engineers, farmers, school teachers, all walks of life jobs they were doing. And there were moms and dads and all kinds of stuff. And so in 5 days, my whole life transformed to what I thought was raising expectations and having a transformative learning experience in such a short amount of time was a very potent experience. May you all have a similar experience at some point in your life in the near term, because I recommend it. But so I came back, and off to college I went. I went to Purdue University for undergrad, and then I changed my major not once, twice, 5 different times. Anyone here ever changed their major? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. 5 times, who cares? I ended up settling on a dual degree, one in chemistry and a second degree in communications, just because I liked liberal arts and it was fun, and I liked the hard science, so I could talk to anyone about advanced quantum mechanics and great expectations all in one conversation. It's kind of cool. But then I went off to grad school. Now, if you want to go to the next slide. As part of your first year of grad school, in this case I went to Penn State University and State College, Pennsylvania, some of the best years of my life. You have to interview with prospective research advisors. And I went into the interview with faculty remember, it was actually number 3 of 4. The first 2 were, yeah, thanks for stopping by, Cary. This is what we do, and this is really cool that you're interested in my work, and thank you very much for coming by. Cool. But faculty member number 3, when I showed up at his office, he wasn't there. He blew me off. I'm like, okay, well, I talked to his staff assistant. We rescheduled for the next day. Went back to the office again. He didn't show up again. Now, his office was 5 miles off campus. I had to take a city bus from main campus out to the research park where he was to meet with him. It was quite a hassle to keep going back and forth to meet with this guy that kept blowing me off. So by the 3rd time, like on the 3rd day, he finally was in his office and he was willing to meet with me. And we sat down and went through the whole scripted interview, nature of your research, these aspects of your work interest me, and I found your publications to be, very insightful, blah, 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 and this and that. And then you get to the point when you say, well, would you be open to me joining your research group? And he said no. Naturally, I couldn't resist to ask why. And he said to me, because I view you as a financial liability. Why should I invest my grant research dollars in you when I can invest them in someone else that will be more productive than you? All right. I was a little disappointed, to say the least. But you know what I did? I thanked him for being honest. I try to find the positive in anything. And that was about the only thing I could figure out, because I knew what he thought. I didn't have to leave there wondering, right? Isn't there an element? So then, later on that afternoon, I had to meet with interview number 4, who turned out to be my research advisor, Dr. Tom Maluk, a very well-published inorganic chemist. And I went through the whole spiel with him about how I was going to do my research, my lab work, and track notes and notebooks and so on and so forth. And I got to the ask. I said, would you be open to having me join your research group? And he said, yes, Cary, I would. Now, after that earlier that afternoon, I was like, really? He says, yes, Cary. He says, you've been problem solving all your life to overcome your disability. That's the essence of what scientists do. Oh my gosh, I just had the big lump in my throat when he said that. Because he gets it, right? Can you guys follow this?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, excuse me?
Could you repeat that last bit, please?
Sure. He said that you have been problem solving to overcome your disability for your entire life. That is the essence of what scientists do. We problem solve. We figure things out. And since I had a life experience of overcoming challenges and accessing information, he viewed me as an asset to his team. And so I'm forever grateful for that, and that's why I have him acknowledged here on the slide. The next slide, please.
Yeah, that's the German slide.
Okay, so stuff I've been involved with since grad school. I did a postdoc at Purdue University, which is pretty common after you get your doctorate. And then I went off and became a chemistry professor for a time at Illinois State University, where I got to teach sighted kids Chem Lab. And some of you heard my story earlier today about the fire in the lab experience. That was pretty cool. I really am grateful for my student for creating that scenario for me. But and then I went back to Purdue as a full-time research scientist in the chemistry department. And then I, in 2016, received several job offers. You actually can get multiple job offers, ladies and gentlemen, if you build your resume and have an extensive publication and grant. So that's why I'm in Princeton, New Jersey now, and you know, enjoying life in the educational assessment field. It's been wonderful. But and paralleling all of this, I did start my company, Independent Science, back in 2009 while I was still in graduate school. And that's an access technology company that did a tech transfer agreement with Penn State University to take all of the talking lab tools that I developed as part of my dissertation. And we commercialized that technology and improved it in several iterations. And it's been helping blind and vision impaired kids around the world learn science in a more hands-on way since. And it's been wonderful to see that that contribution is making a difference. The next slide, please. I thought it was on the next slide. Oh, it is on this slide. Okay, all right. So through all of these accomplishments, I don't want you to think that I had to do all this all by myself. Okay, that's not the case at all. I would go to conferences and meet people from all walks of life, from other faculty members to other company salespeople to owners of various chemistry and science education companies. And of course, I had my interest in making science accessible to blind and vision impaired kids. Okay. And I wanted to make science laboratory learning more accessible to blind and vision impaired kids. And so I met Dave Veneer, who's the owner and founder of Veneer Software and Technology, now recently rebranded Veneer Science Education. And he started his company in 1981 to sell lab probes to schools all around the world at reasonable prices for data collection in the classroom context. All right, and I think some of you guys here at Landmark use their products now, which is pretty cool. And we really struck up a really cool conversation, and he was very intrigued by the idea of making his products talk and make their stuff work to help blind kids learn science. He said, okay, well, I'll support your grant proposal to the National Science Foundation, and I'll give you a support letter, and we'll give you the software for free, and we'll let you work with our software development team, and we'll let you buy sensors at cost, and so on and so forth to see what we can do with this. This was after like a 15-minute conversation on the phone. I called them out of the blue. He didn't know me from anybody else. I'll leave them nameless. They sent me product catalogs. And so put his letter in with my proposal to make the Veneer products talk for blind kids, and we're going to field test it at a residential school for the blind. And NSF, they funded the project. So after 3 years of financial support, we proved that text-to-speech enabled laboratory tools helped blind kids take a greater interest in math and science classes. Cool. But it was in a blind school scenario. We wanted to do a mainstream school study next. So we applied for our second NSF grant to do a mainstream school study, wrote it all up, and they funded it. Cool, I'm 2 for 2. Getting grants funded is easy. And with the second grant, I recruited, ended up being 15 high schools across the United States and setting video recording equipment and lab sensors and computers with JAWS, the JAWS text-to-speech screen reader on it, and working with the teachers to develop lab curriculum that would be more conducive to blind students learning through physical engaging manipulations and such. And at the end of that study, 14 out of the 15 participants demonstrated a much stronger interest in math and science pre-post intervention. One kid didn't change at all, but 14 out of 15 is a sizable percentage. And of the 14 that showed a positive shift, 7 of them became math and STEM majors, or STEM professionals after graduation. From computer scientist to statistician to mathematician to another computer scientist to electrical engineer. So that told me that my interventions are making a difference, which was pretty cool, and hence why I was motivated to commercialize them and make them available to blind kids all around the world. So that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for my contact with Dave Veneer and pitching an idea to him, but also I don't know how to code. I'm not a software engineer, as I've told some of you throughout the last 2 days here at Landmark. And so I had to recruit software developers to do the JAWS scripting coding that we needed to make JAWS work with the data collection software. And so meeting developers, meeting company owners, having an interest in making 2 different branches of technology work together that weren't intended to work together. Okay, this was all done through building a social network. Can you see why that's important? And a lot of people in the world undervalue their social network. The people that you know and interact with and really get to know, you learn what they're able to do, what their interests are. You learn who they know. You meet some of their friends. Okay, this sounds like a Taylor Swift song. You know my friends who know your friends who blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And you do a lot of that here in the college context. But then once you graduate from here and you start your professional careers, you're going to have coworkers and their family members, and you're hopefully going to do professional development and meeting people in those contexts. And staying in touch with people and learning who's interested in what is a very powerful resource to build. And keeping contacts in your phone or however you track contact information, it makes you a very valuable person to prospective employers. If you can leverage experience, knowledge, legal support, whatever, to inform what you say to your prospective employer, advising them as to what they should do in specific situations. Do you guys follow me? Yes. Okay, so never undervalue your social network, and don't give other people access to it before you're ready and that you trust that individual to do so. Because I've had people in my past, they know I know a lot of people, and they want me to introduce them to prospective employers, and they just are using me to get to a prospective employer, and they don't really care about my interests. And unfortunately, there are people out there that are like that, and you're going to encounter them. But you're going to learn from that experience and to control who you give access to your network and who you don't. But it's very, very valuable, especially in this day of LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and social media. It's even more so now than ever before. So, all right, next slide, please. What slide number is it? Okay, so my company, Independent Science, I view it as a vehicle by which I created back in 2009 to promote change, as I sort of hinted at, by making the technology available to blind people. Yeah. Thank you. So through this company, we also employ a whole team of blind scientists that I've met over the years in various contexts. And blind people really struggle finding mainstream employment in the science fields because there's still a lot of discrimination by a lot of prospective employers as to how a blind person could work safely in the laboratory or work with laboratory equipment that wasn't designed to be used by blind and vision impaired people. Okay. I worked with all kinds of expensive lab equipment when I was in graduate school that was hundreds of thousands of dollars per device. How did I do it? Well, I used a human interface. I used a lab tech to read off the data points that were coming in. They made raised line drawings of graphical outputs for me to interpret. It was up to me to design the experiments, do all the calculations, make all the hypotheses and predictions that were required. And then running the experiments, the lab tech would help me mix and pour chemicals and such. They would describe visual color changes and things that occurred. And I was the one that was responsible for drawing all the conclusions in the process. And hence did the conference presentations, the publications, and so on and so forth. And I talked to my advisor, Dr. Maluk, a lot about what I was seeing and getting his input on if what I was experiencing was indeed a rational conclusion or not. And I will tell you, early on in my graduate career, I made a lot of non-logical conclusions, but over time I learned from my mistakes. And as you all know, most lab experiments don't work the first time you do them. Now, a lot of your lab classes that you take, those labs, I'm going to let you in a little secret. The faculty in the room aren't going to like this. Those labs have been done millions of times, or tens of thousands of times. They work very well. Yes. But when you enter the graduate realm, you're doing experiments that have likely never been done before. And I think I heard a statistic of over 99% of experiments fail on their first run. So it's very different once you get to grad school. But undergrad, you guys are you're still learning the basic skills of how to do data collection and analysis and process, and that's where you should learn that. So anyway, next slide, please. So one of the inventions I designed when I was in grad school, I had to come up with a way to detect the formation of a precipitate in a clear solution. And I worked with a senior electrical engineering team at Penn State to design the original submersible audible light sensor, or SALS sensor, that consists of a light sensor in a glass tube, and it measured ambient light and converted that light detection into a voltage, and the voltage was outputted to a tone generator. And depending on the intensity of the light, determined the strength of the tone. All right. And this was one of the tools in the research study I mentioned as part of my dissertation work that was found to be very valuable. But the problem with it was all prototype tech. So there was no way to get it out there for the masses to use. And so I work with my friends at the American Printing House for the Blind to, again, leveraging social network with organizational collaboration to take my prototype and make it commercially available to the world. So September of last year, the SALS sensor is now commercially available for $79 in their catalog. And rumor has it, the folks at Landmark are going to get the chance to play with some of these in the near term. Right? Yes.
Yes.
So I want to hear the feedback on what you guys think of the SALS, and if it helps you see color changes more clearly. It's set up to tell you audibly when you hear color changes. It can detect the evolution of bubbles from solutions, in addition to detecting thin, slight precipitate solution changes in the liquid layer. And it's really great at acid-base titrations. Anyone ever do an acid-base titration? And you miss your endpoint? You pass the equivalence point? Yes. Well, with the SALS, you nail it because you hear it coming. And it's like, you never miss again. It's great. Well, they'll find out.
Okay.
They'll find out. All right, the next slide, please. All right. So to succeed as a scientist with a disability, you need access to resources. And for those of you that are in school here at Landmark, you guys have lots of resources at your disposal, which is great. And mentors, and everyone in the room has a mentor or two of one sort or another. Is that correct? Yes. Anyone that's not nodding? No. Do you want a mentor? Raise your hand. No, don't do that. But for me, I had the pleasure of working with a Dr. David Wohlers, who was a blind chemistry professor at Truman State University. He retired several years back and is enjoying life as a retiree now. I can't wait for my retirement because he's always in the Caribbean or on the cruise, or he loves the beach. I love the beach, but I can't go to the beach every day like him because I'm not retired yet. But when he was a chemistry professor, he inspired me because I wanted to be able to teach and lecture, do demos for kids, teach lab, and he was doing all of that. And so he agreed to be my mentor around my junior year of undergrad, all the way through grad school. So on those days when I didn't pass a P-Chem exam, or I struggled through organic chemistry lab, or whatever the challenge was, I could pick up the phone and call him, and he would just encourage me to keep going and giving me advice on what I could do to learn from the situation. And so having that mentor to just tell them how you're feeling and what you can do to do things better is very valuable. So I want to congratulate everyone that is involved in this mentorship program because it really, really is valuable. So I wouldn't be a scientist today if I didn't have Dr. Wohlers mentoring me the whole way through. So the next, so the mentor, and then of course the skills. We have to learn the actual skills in the lab, how to do titrations and measure masses and make observations and record stuff in the lab notebook, signing and dating every lab page. Do you guys do paper notebooks still? Yes. Okay, good. They haven't gone away to the digital full. So you've got to sign and date every page, right? There's a reason for that, you know. You all know what that is, right? Yeah, you do. I'm not going to talk about it because we're running out of time. All right, the next slide, please. Okay, so this is a blind man named Eric Wainmeyer. I mentioned him to a couple of you throughout my visit. Most of you may not know who Eric Wainmeyer is. He's a blind mountaineer. And in 2001, the National Federation of the Blind, you notice how they keep coming up here? They sponsored a mountain expedition for him and a team to climb to the top of Mount Everest. Now, you all know that Mount Everest is the tallest mountain on Earth, right?
Yes.
Exactly. And they didn't just want to sponsor this expedition to have them carry Eric up to the top of the mountain and put him up there and say, hey, the blind have summited the tallest mountain in the world. No, he was a full-fledged member of this team, carried his own stuff. He walked out over the ice crevices and was way above the, thousands of feet below. He could have fallen to his death. And he summited the mountain with his teammates. And he wrote a book, To Touch the Top of the World. I highly recommend you read it if you can.
I read it. It's very inspiring.
It's very inspiring. Yeah, and I had the pleasure of meeting Eric shortly after the successful summiting of Mount Everest. And I said to him, so what was it like on the top of the mountain? And I said, was there a gift shop up there? Because they always said there's a gift shop at everywhere significant up there. But he had the pleasure of being up there for about 15 or 20 minutes before he had to come down. And he's hence summited all of the highest peaks on every continent of the world. And, so this vision of climbing to the top of the world, I think is very inspirational to me as a blind person, but maybe it's inspirational to you guys too. I don't know. But we all have our mountains to climb, and we all have our dreams we want to pursue, whatever it is. And if my presentation today got you thinking a little more broadly of what I thought I was going to do, maybe I could do something more than what I thought. Because through my involvement with the National Federation of the Blind, through my graduate school learning experience at Penn State University, to Mr. Wainmeyer's inspirational story to climb to the top of the world, and of course on that opening slide of the Blind Driver Challenge and the blind football player and all that, it really inspires me to work hard, to think outside the box, and to do what I want to do, and not let the people around me say, Cary, you can't take calculus, or you can't be a scientist because I don't want to invest my grant dollars in you, or whatever. There are always going to be people that are going to tell you you can't do something. The question is, do you believe that? Do you buy it? And I hope you would say, no, you don't buy it. You're going to bust your butt to do what you have to do to get to know the people you need to know, to get the resources you need, to get the mentorship you need, to develop the skills that you need to accomplish your goals, whatever they are. Whether they be to become a chemistry professor like myself, or the best software engineer ever trained in the world, to, I don't know, the next astronaut with a disability to go to the ISS before they close it down by 2030. That was a dream I had, but I'm starting to get old enough I realize that's probably not going to happen for me. But to you guys, some of you still have a shot at that. So the next one, the Island Conference. This is a conference that I organize every fall at Princeton University. And rumor has it some of you might be able to come down from Landmark to join us, so I hope you can. It's a conference, yes.
Yeah, comment.
It's a conference to promote inclusive science, educational learning, methodologies, technologies, and yes, experiences by students and professionals with disabilities to share their stories, to access technology companies, other science educators, faculty, and it's just a wonderful networking opportunity, and we really hope you can come down and join us in Princeton in October. Some of you will hear more about that in time. And then the next slide. I have to acknowledge and thank everyone for sponsoring my visit this week, the folks at Landmark College, and I want to thank you all for your attention. Thank you very much. You want to put the question slide up?
We have time for a few questions.
Excuse me?
We have time for a few
Oh, I do.
questions.
They do. Yeah, absolutely.
We have time for a few questions if anyone has a question. Yeah.
In terms of accessibility, is the sound based on pitch or volume?
It's pitch. You can control the volume just for just ease of hearing, but it's the light intensity is controlled by the pitch.
And does it connect to like assisted hearing devices?
It pairs with an iPhone, so if your iPhone connects to assisted listening devices, then it can do that. Okay?
Question up there.
So, what accessibility devices that are coming up are you most interested in, or accessibility as convenience devices?
In the blindness arena, the multi-line refreshable braille technologies are really, really exciting. So what I have here is a note-taking device, and it's got one line of braille. And blind people, we've been limited to one line of refreshable braille for literally decades. And we've dreamed about multi-line capability so we can read things in a more two-dimensional fashion, especially if you're trying to do arithmetic or algebraic math manipulations. Right now, all of that we see it linearly at one line at a time. And these things are on the verge of becoming commercially available. I've actually seen several different prototypes in recent weeks. And it used to be, I'll believe it when I see it, that it will actually happen, but I have now seen it. And I can tell you it will happen, and I'm hoping by possibly as soon as this summer they'll be commercially available, but maybe not till the fall. But by the end of the calendar year, I'm overly optimistic that they will be available. And the nice thing about the multi-line refreshable braille technology is it allows you to also have dynamic graphic representations on the same surface. So having braille and graphical representations that can change. So if you guys ever use any animations on your computer screens, I'll be able to feel that on this display and actually feel the animation changing under my fingertips. So it's kind of cool. Very exciting.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yes.
So, my question is, what do you think about limitation with disability?
Okay.
Because for my whole life, I have been told I'm dyslexic and thus can't read, and now I read every day.
Okay.
And I also think it's an important thing to note the stigma against colleges like Landmark, that the median income of people leaving Landmark is $24,000.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say to sort of this idea that even is sometimes perpetrated at Landmark, that disability is immutable, and essentially is that you can't change any behavior, and that's just a part of you?
So a couple things. First, with regards to the first part of your question about limitations, it's important to have a good understanding of what we can do versus what we really can't do. Okay. Now, I used to think that I can't drive a car. But, as you saw in my opening slide, my friend Mark Riccobono, he actually drove a car, and there was a situation where he drove his wife and kids, who are all blind or visually impaired, around downtown Baltimore in his car with the non-visual access techniques. Now, they had to close the roads down because my friend Mark doesn't have a driver's license. You see, but the fact was he got in a car with his family, strapped in his two kids in the back, in child care, what do they call those? Child safety seats in a car? Yeah, car seats. And then he backed the car out of the park and drove his family around the park. I don't know about you, but I thought that was pretty cool. But then, with regards to the other part of the question about the perceived stigma on this type of learning environment, I said in my remarks about learning skills. And I think it's most important for anyone here to find a learning environment that they're comfortable in, where they can optimize the opportunity to learn whatever skills they feel they need or want to learn, and learn how to do them well. So when you go out into the quote-unquote real world, you have a marketable skill set that you can leverage. Okay, so I took some criticism as an undergraduate student at Purdue by my blind friends because Purdue University started a Braille production facility as a result of my enrollment in math and science classes back in the 90s. And they started producing raised line drawings and technical Braille documents for me for every class within 48 business hours of professors handing the handouts out and the books. And my blind friend said, Cary, that's not the way the real world works. So after you graduate, you're not going to be able to get those resources to be successful after. So why would you want them now? My counter argument was, if I don't learn the skills and the knowledge before, I would not be a scientist today if I didn't have those resources. So use the resources that you have access to in the environment where you find yourself to be. Take full advantage of it, optimize skills, and set your goals high, and be willing to work hard to get to where you want to be. Does that make sense? And don't let other people tell you can't do something you want to do. Because there's always going to be so-called experts that are going to tell you that. All right? Does that make sense?
Colin, do you have a question?
Okay, good. All right.
If I may, could you repeat, you said take full advantage of the resources you have on hand, set goals high. What was the other one aside from not letting people tell you that you can't do what you want to do?
Yeah.
What was the fourth thing?
Let's see. Take advantage of the goal. What was the fourth thing? I don't remember the fourth point.
I think the second thing you said.
Okay.
The third and fourth or second.
Skills.
Yeah, learn the skills and learn them well in this environment, because you've got people here that are very supportive of you and what you want to do. And I'm confident they're not going to tell you, no, you can't do it. Yeah.
One last question. Colin, did you have one?
What does universal design mean?
Well, you would end with a loaded question, but that's okay. Universal design, that term originated in the architecture field. It's to try to make an experience accessible to as many people as is possible. I don't believe that every experience can be made fully accessible to everyone. But I think the goal should be to make experiences as accessible as possible to as many people as is possible. And if it happens to be inclusive for all, great. But there's going to be a lot of things in the world that we can get close to it, but there's always exceptions to every rule that we didn't think of, and so I think that's what it means to me. It's at the core of this whole concept of inclusion, equity and inclusion, but it really presents a real intellectual challenge to make everything fully accessible to everyone. That everyone is a pretty wide scope of people. Would you agree? Yes. And so the key is to get as many people included as is possible, and to be agile about your product offering. So if someone comes out of the woodwork that needs to access to your product or service, to not tell them no, but rather to work with them to figure out how to mitigate it and make it accessible to them. So, all right.
Let's thank our speaker one more time.